Radio 531 PI, 20 minutes to 8 with Brian on Pacific Breakfast. With the election less than 2 weeks out, every morning on the Pacific Breakfast Show, we are looking at the issues, the candidates, the parties, policies and stories to give you, our Radio 531 PI listeners, as much information to make an informed decision come election day, the 23rd of September. And as part of our election countdown 2017, this morning we welcome to the studio James Shaw, leader of the Green Party. James was elected to Parliament as a List MP in 2014, and prior to becoming an MP, James had a successful career in management consulting, primarily in London, where he lived from 1998 to 2010. And on that note, it is a very warm welcome to the show this morning, James. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
And thank you for your time. Well, management consultancy, any sort of similarities from your previous life with your current career choice?
Well, actually, it's quite surprising how many similarities there are. I mean, Parliament, I have to say, is completely unique, and there's nothing like it in the world in any industry or anything like that. But, my job in consulting was really to think about how we create change. And, of course, in many ways, that's exactly what Parliament does as well. So you have to think about, what's the end that we're trying to achieve and sort of work backwards from there, and who do we need to influence and how do we bring people along with us and all of those things. So there are things from my career that I've certainly carried through into this new job.
Definitely. And talking about, influence, in terms of the minor party leader debate that took place on Friday, your thoughts?
Oh, well, I mean, it's always difficult when there's so many people, but I'm pretty happy with my own performance, and I've got a lot of respect for the other people who are on the panel as well. So obviously everybody's vying for, not just to return to Parliament, but also, we're all hoping to be part of the next government, whatever shape that is.
And, of course, with regards to yesterday, the Green Party climate change policy launched yesterday in Auckland. And, of course, one of the pillars on which the Green Party stands. Can you tell us more about that, please, James?
Yeah, look, I'm really excited about the policy that we announced yesterday. So the idea is that we're going to put a proper price on the pollution that causes climate change. That's our greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, many of your listeners from the Pacific Islands will know that this is a very live and real threat to many of the islands in the Pacific, as well as New Zealand's own coastal areas. And so the idea is that we're going to charge businesses for polluting the atmosphere, basically, and then we're going to give that money directly back to New Zealanders. So the idea is that at the end of every year, we'll divide up the amount of revenue that we gather from the pollution tax, and every New Zealander will basically get a cheque. And we estimate that that'll be about $250 a year. And we're also going to change the tax system, so that we're going to lower the tax rate on the first $14,000 of income that you earn from 10.5% to 9%, and that means that everybody gets $210 a year as well. And that just helps to offset any increases in price that the pollution tax has on, for example, electricity or petrol.
James, talking with regards to the tax, the water tax, as it's been called, a lot of discussion and robust discussion on Friday night along with the main party leaders' debate. Can you tell us more about that and how it could possibly work under a Labour, Greens government?
Yeah, so what the Green Party has said is that we think that we should charge directly for pollution, and because all of the other parties are saying, well, look, we need to clean up our rivers, and that's a good thing. Everyone's agreed on that point. And then the question is, how do you do it? And so some parties are proposing to charge for water use and then use the revenue to clean up rivers. And what we're saying is, well, actually, wouldn't it be better if you charged the pollution itself? And that way there's an incentive to stop polluting it in the first place rather than spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to clean up the pollution. Wouldn't it be easier if we just stopped polluting the rivers in the first place?
Some other points to discuss. I mean, today you're looking at the youth mental policy announcement in Parliament, well, down in Wellington. Can you tell us, a little bit about that? And of course, pay equity for women, which the Green Party are very strong on that as well. If you could share more with us.
Certainly. Well, I mean, when it comes to youth mental health, this is frankly New Zealand's shame. And again, I think it's one of those issues that all political parties are starting to realise that they need to do something about. And it's always been something that's quite important to us in the Greens. And New Zealand does have the highest youth suicide rate in the Western world, and we frankly think that that's unacceptable. So today we're going to launch a policy which says, well, how do we reach out to these young people? What support do people need to do? So I'm really, really looking forward to being able to say that later on today. And when it comes to pay equity, this is one of those things I think that New Zealanders have gotten quite complacent about. We were the first country where women won the right to vote, and we passed the Equal Pay Act in 1972, which was the year before I was born. But actually, women are not paid the same as men in this country, and actually for Pacific Island women, they're still paid about 25% less than men for the same work. So there's a huge gap there. And what we've said is, look, it's 2017. We're pretty well into the 21st century now. It's time that we actually got our act together on this. And so what we want to do is we want to introduce reporting for companies so that they gather the data about what the difference is between what men in the company get paid and what women in the company get paid. And an experience from overseas where this has been done is that that's been the single most effective measure because, when you shine a light on something, usually the company bosses look at it and go, oh, crikey, we didn't know it was that bad, and then they take action to address it.
James, big issues as well in terms of homelessness and poverty. A lot of people saying, the divide between the have and the have-nots getting, bigger and bigger. Can you talk to us about how the Green Party, if voted or, into power, how you will address those issues?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you're absolutely right about the haves and the have-nots. So although incomes have the gap between high-income earners and low-income earners has actually not changed a huge amount, the problem is that the property crisis, the property bubble has meant that people who already had properties are now many times more well off than they were, and it's locked out people who didn't own property. And so what you're seeing is a massive wealth disparity in New Zealand, and it's starting to create an almost a feudal kind of situation where you've got earners and owners in the country. And so, what we need in order to do that and in order to fix that is really comprehensive. And every party is pushing their own silver bullet. What I keep saying is actually you need to do everything. The state needs to get involved building, owning and operating its own houses. It's got to regulate the rental market a lot better. It's got to discourage massive speculation in the property market by reforming the tax system. We have to stop, non-resident foreign buyers from participating in the New Zealand property market because the distortionary impact of that foreign capital is massive. We literally have to do everything, and we have to treat it as the crisis that it is, because if we don't, we'll continue to just tinker around the edges and poke at the problem without actually really solving it. It is, I think, the most urgent issue in New Zealand today.
James, I want to go back to climate change. I read an interesting tweet from the 7th last week. Your tweet, fighting climate change is the greatest economic opportunity in generations. How so?
Well, so this is the thing. I'm actually really excited about this idea of moving New Zealand to a zero-carbon economy because by definition, a zero-carbon economy is highly productive. It's extremely efficient, and you've had to create new technologies and, sell high-value products overseas and so on. And so what that means is higher wages, better jobs, and in every field where we've got air pollution, whether it's agriculture or transport or energy, construction, there is a new industrial revolution taking place and new technologies that are emerging. And the problem that I see at the moment is that New Zealand is at risk of missing out on those opportunities because we haven't taken this challenge seriously. I compare it to the moon landing. In the 1960s, John F. Kennedy said that, we aim to land a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth within this decade, because that challenge will organise and measure the very best of our skills and abilities, and that challenge is one that we're willing to accept and unwilling to postpone. And, at the time that he said that, they didn't have the technology to land a man on the moon. They had some ideas about what they needed, but in less than 10 years, they built a rocket and, put John Armstrong on the moon, brought him safely back home to Earth. And in so doing, they unlocked all of these incredible technologies and new industries that applied, outside of the space industry, but all over the United States. And so climate change is kind of like our moon landing.
James, in saying that, do you see a time, or can you give like a time frame where new technologies would overtake the core industries such as dairy, as forestry, as construction, as you mentioned?
Well, it's already happening. You look at electric vehicles are already outpacing, traditional petrol-driven engines. And in the dairy industry, there are actually some new technologies that are emerging and some new ways of thinking about how we farm that are actually more profitable than our kind of traditional methods of farming, but also have much, much lower pollution into the air and into the soil and into the water. And so, there's in different fields, things are moving faster than others. When it comes to renewable energy, for example, we think that New Zealand could be 100% renewable by 2030, while it'll take, for example, it might take our agricultural industry another decade or two to get to the point that there's zero pollution. But, I'm excited about those opportunities.
James, just before we go, I wanted to talk a little bit, in the aftermath of very publicised changes in the Green Party structure. Of course, the resignation of Matitia Tude, senior Green Party MPs, as well as Chief of Staff leaving, and, recent Colmar Brunting polling the Green Party at around the 5% threshold currently. How have you, how has the party managed the aftermath of that in terms of those seismic shifts, if you will?
Yeah, well, I have to say that I have been supremely impressed with my team, and I don't just mean the staff at the parliamentary office or over at the Green Party itself, but all of our members of parliament have stepped up to the plate, and our candidates all over the country have actually been redoubling their efforts. We're actually running the best election campaign that we have ever run. We've got thousands of volunteers all over the country who are out door knocking and phone calling. There's just colossal energy, and we're not spending a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror because we can't afford to. We've really just got to focus on winning the election. And I actually feel at this particular point in time that we have the best opportunity that we have ever had to form a Labour Green government, the most environmentally friendly and most progressive government that this country has seen in generations.
On that note, it is a very big thank you, James Shaw, a Green Party leader. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and wishing you and the team all the very best in the lead up to 23rd of September. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show.
Cheers.